Hello and good morning to our first special webcast in partnership with Ealing Council. Today we'll be hearing from Ealing Council officers about how their work is helping to support local businesses during the pandemic. And two local businesses will share their experience of how they've responded to COVID-19 and have worked through the myriad of challenges presented to ensure their survival. We'll be also hear how Eat Out to Help Out, which launched on Monday, is starting to make a difference. My panel today are Joe Blanchard, Regulatory Operations Manager at Ealing Council, his colleague Lisa Buckmaster in Enforcement and Inspection, Victoria Willis, Transport Officer at Ealing Council, as well as Edwin Harrison, Managing Director of Artisan, and Miguel Morales, founder of Reineta. Throughout the programme, my colleague Pim will be monitoring your questions, so please keep them coming through in the YouTube live chat window. So let's get down to business. On the programme today, we are going to be exploring, first of all, regulation. Then we'll talk about some of the enforcement and inspection issues that are being thrown up on our high streets today. Transport will be next up in the conversation, followed by much more detail and business views on Eat Out to Help Out. And we'll wrap up with some news on the council's approach to working in partnership with local businesses and stakeholders. So first of all, a warm welcome to Joe from the regulation team at Ealing Council. Great to have you on the programme, and you're linked today via a novel connection into our virtual studio, my mobile phone on the desk. So we're going to see how this work around some of the technology gremlins that have affected us today sort of plays out. Now the first question I wanted to put to you, Joe, was around this notion of COVID-19 secure, which is the focus for a lot of local companies today. I wonder whether you can tell us a little bit about how businesses can achieve that status, Joe.
Yeah, sure. So COVID-19 Secure was something set up by government, and it basically is an indication that a business or establishment is following the government's guidelines on what steps should be taken to reduce the risk of COVID-19 transmission. So the government have produced various guidelines for different sectors, and generally their publication has coincided with the reopening of that sector. In terms of achieving COVID-19 status, there are 5 main steps. The first one is to carry out a COVID-19 risk assessment. Now, the government have put lots of resources in place online for businesses to follow so that they can achieve, so they can carry out the COVID-19 risk assessment. In particular, the Health and Safety Executive actually have a free online and telephone service for those who are carrying out the risk assessments to help them along. And probably risk assessment is the most important part of achieving COVID-19 secure status, because that kind of determines the rest of the measures that you'll put in place. But step 1 is risk assessment. Step 2 is improving cleaning, hand washing and hygiene procedures amongst customers and staff. So that can include things like increasing the frequency of touch points for staff and for customers, and also increasing the amount of hand washing facilities or hand sanitizers that are available. The third step is just, where possible, helping your people work from home. So this is obviously to reduce the transmission between employees, although obviously the government recognised that, it's not possible for everyone to work from home. So they just ask that you put in place every sort of possible measure you can do to mitigate the risk of transmission. The fourth one is to maintain a 2 metre social distance between people, and the fifth one is where you can't maintain a 2 metre social distance, that you put in place some other measure. So whether that's putting in place perspex screens or barriers, or reducing the number of people that are on site at any one time, and then lastly providing regarding PPE, so whether that's masks or gloves, etc. So just to finish off, what the council have done is, because there are so many guidelines out there issued by government, we've produced some, we've kind of distilled those down into guidelines that are useful for Ealing businesses, and they're all freely available on our website. So yeah, that's COVID-19 secure.
That's really good to know, and I suppose some of the important takeaways for businesses sort of tuning in. I'm sure many have been crawling over these issues for the past few months. Is that the guidelines can vary a bit by sector in terms of COVID secure status. A risk assessment needs to be completed, but also I have to say, new to me today was your point around the Health and Safety Executive Helpline, which sounds like a really valuable resource. Now, one of the other sort of terms that sort of seems to be coming up ever more in conversation these days is this idea of an outbreak and prevention control plan. Can you tell me a bit more about what's involved in those?
Yeah, sure. So all councils were required to develop their own COVID-19 outbreak prevention and control plan, which works in conjunction with the NHS test and trace system. So the aim of the system as a whole is to make sure that any significant contacts of people that have tested positive for COVID-19 infection isolate for 14 days. So the council's plan details how the council's overall response to cases in Ealing, as well as how any outbreaks might be managed within the borough. So outbreaks are just generally defined as a situation where 2 or more positive cases are linked by a single setting. So fundamental to the success of the tracing system is the role that businesses need to play in keeping records of staff, customers and visitors to their sites, so that if there are any positive cases or outbreaks linked to their establishments, they can give information to the health protection officials. So in general, businesses should keep a temporary record for 21 days of people that have been on their site. But Public Health England have provided some really good advice on how this can be accomplished while complying with privacy and data legislation, which I know is quite a worry for businesses when they read about the records they need to keep. But many businesses will find that they often have a system that already exists. So that might be through records of staff shifts or rotas or bookings, or even invoice records or visitor sign-in sheets that they have anyway. So often this kind of system can piggyback off what they have already. So I suppose the real key message as well for businesses is that if you or your staff have tested positive for COVID-19, you can contact the council, and the email address is long, but it's quite easy to remember. It's COVID-19 business compliance at ealing.gov.uk, and it's obviously on our website. But we can provide advice on infection prevention and control and connect you with public health and health protection advice. If there's more... That's really good to know. And just picking up on your point around sort of registering visitors, I can see how that works on a sort of practical level. If you're in an office and you've got a reception where people might check in as they arrive, or indeed a restaurant would probably have a booking system. But would that really extend to a cafe, for example? What are the expectations there on a practical level? Yeah, well, the expectations are that businesses will do what they can to reduce the risk of transmission, one of the things that will reduce the general risk of transmission is having a really strong test and trace system. And certainly in other European countries, they will have a very strict set of guidelines in terms of keeping people's records. But I would recommend something practical. So perhaps if you had if people are having a sit down kind of offering, then I would suggest that you can take their details, and a name and a telephone number would be sufficient. And in fact, we do also get concerns reported to us by members of the public and consumers by saying, I visited this establishment and they didn't even ask me for any details.
That's interesting. I'm sure that's going to get the cogs turning of possibly some of our panelists today, but also other businesses locally in terms of how you make that work in practice. A final question for you, Joe, before we let you go, and that is what financial support is the council providing to businesses at this time?
Sure. So the council's provided all of the mandatory kind of funding that central government have suggested. So we've got a really good webpage on our website, which I've given the link for. But the council provided, for example, was I think one of the first in the country to provide automatic business rate relief grants for small businesses, and I think within a week of that being asked for by government, we'd given them to 94% of businesses that are eligible. So there's lots of useful information on our website about different kind of business rate relief support, discretionary business grants, business interruption loans, and coronavirus bounce back loans. But we also have a really useful tool called the Support Finder. So it's just an online tool that will you put in some details about your business, and it will give you back a list of options of things that you can investigate. And I'd really recommend using that, because I know a lot of businesses have found that useful, because it can be quite daunting looking at all the different things that are available.
Yeah, as you say, it's a neat tool. We're going to have a link to the council's business coronavirus website at the end of the programme. And as you say, the discretionary grant scheme, the clock is ticking, time is running out to get those applications in. So that, I think, is one particularly for local businesses to focus it in on at this time. Now, from regulatory, we're going to turn to enforcement and inspection. And I'm going to bring in Lisa to tell us a bit more about what businesses should be taking into consideration before moving outdoors onto the sort of pavement space, perhaps for the first time. Lisa. Now, I'm not sure we're getting any audio through from Lisa at the moment. It's been a connection with lots of gremlins today. So I think what we're going to do is turn to Victoria for a perspective on transport, letting Lisa hopefully rejoin us shortly with hopefully a more solid link. So transport, of course, Ealing, home to Brompton Bicycle, a fantastic sort of local manufacturer, churning out, I think, 50,000 bicycles every year, including e-bicycles these days. I wonder, Victoria, whether you can start just by giving us a bit of a flavour of how your current sort of COVID transport strategy overlaps with the council's sort of transport objectives more generally. Victoria.
Mm-hmm. Hi. Yeah, absolutely. Our sort of COVID transport strategy completely overlaps with our overall transport long-term objectives. So, as laid out in our transport strategy and our zero carbon by 2030 strategy, we aim to increase the modal share of people travelling actively. So that's by walking and cycling, and ordinarily by public transport as well. So we aim to increase the modal share of that, and also to improve road safety. And our COVID transport strategy absolutely overlaps with that, as we're following TfL and government guidelines, which is to, as I said, encourage active travel, because that is, given the sort of reduced capacity of public transport, that is a way to accommodate this surplus of journeys that can't be made by any other means apart from private car, and we're trying to sort of prevent that as much as possible.
And would you say that approach, would you say that approach, Victoria, aligns with the sort of central government thinking in this area?
Yes, so absolutely. It's been the case for all local authorities in London. I'm expecting across the country as well. Our transport budget has been completely cut. So the only funding available to us now is for COVID mitigation measures. And as far as our guidance goes, for the funding from TfL and from the Department of Transport, the guidance is that the funding is only for social distancing and active travel measures.
Fantastic. Now, there's this term active travel that is forever kicking around in transport circles. I'm not sure to what extent the man or woman on the street would know the definition. But can you perhaps tell us a bit more about what active travel involves and how that can help us when it comes to social distancing and COVID?
Absolutely. So yes, you're definitely not the only person to ask this question. Many people are saying, what has active travel got to do with social distancing? So it boils down to the fact that walking and cycling is a far more space efficient way of moving people around. So or public transport ordinarily, but obviously due to the circumstances, that's kind of out of the picture. And so in order to be able to keep the country moving, keep Ealing moving, we want to be able to have the most number of people moving healthily in a way that doesn't impact upon our health and safety, like private car journeys do, through the impact from the emissions, air pollution, noise pollution, road safety, obesity crisis, climate crisis, etc. So if we're moving people around more safely, that means that they are less likely to turn to public transport or private cars or taxi journeys, and those spaces are obviously enclosed spaces, so you're more sort of at risk of sort of contamination, I guess, in enclosed spaces. So if you make active travel more an inviting sort of opportunity for people, they're more likely to choose that as an option, and therefore more likely to choose that as an option and less likely to go into those enclosed spaces where you're more at risk.
So lots of investment at the moment sort of being ploughed into trying to encourage us all to be active, to walk, to cycle, if we can, to maintain distance wherever possible. I'm wondering, sort of looking through a business lens, what the upside is for a local business owner in Ealing in kind of supporting this approach.
Well, there are fantastic business opportunities when local authorities really get invested in promoting and facilitating active travel. So obviously on the very basic level, walking and cycling are a more space efficient way of moving people around. As I said before, it means that you're getting more footfall, particularly in a retail business area, than you would if you were having people travel by car instead. So you're getting more people, and that means more business. And studies have shown that in high streets where people walk and cycle, they spend 40% more than those people who travel by car. And there are plenty of reports out there that demonstrate those kinds of benefits. We also have other business benefits like fewer sick days for your employees and better productivity for employees, provided that they travel actively, of course.
And for specifically, what is Ealing Council sort of doing at the moment? I mean, I'm noticing as I travel on my bicycle across West London, we're seeing more and more of sort of, I suppose, almost sort of pop-up cycle lanes emerging. Is that a trend across Ealing as well?
Absolutely, yes. So since the announcement of the funding, 2 months ago, we have been really, really busy implementing all kinds of active travel and social distancing measures. So that has varied from footway widenings in the town centres, using temporary barriers, as well as pop-up cycle lanes along some of our main roads, using kind of like plastic wands that are attached to the ground. There's strategic cycle lanes. We've also been working on low traffic neighbourhoods, which involve installing certain closures in clusters of residential streets to encourage active travel in those particular areas, as well as school streets, which are closures in streets surrounding schools, so that families coming to schools are more encouraged to come to school by bike or on foot.
Yeah, no, I certainly find I feel a bit safer with those kind of wand lanes to kind of travel inside. You just have to hope that those bits of plastic don't get crushed too quickly by other vehicles.
They're constantly being monitored.
Now, I'm going to in a program first or a webcast first, we're going to try calling out live to Lisa to see whether we can bring her in by phone. But do stay with us, Victoria, as we may have some questions coming your way now. It's unfortunately Lisa's phone is switched off. It may have overheated in the summer heat, so we're not going to get our live link for the first time from my phone out to Lisa. So let's stick with this transport theme for a bit longer. What's been sort of played back to the team at West London Business, and we do a lot of work, particularly in Park Royal. Is first of all, the challenge of cycle parking. And whether you can get more cycle parking spaces in place, and secondly, we get concerns raised about what happens when the winter comes. It's all very well seeing this big boost in cyclists through the summer, but it's pretty cold out there. So what should we be telling employees to keep them cycling in the winter? Any thoughts?
First of all, to answer your cycle parking question, we are working hard to try to increase the number of cycle parking available in the borough. As far as, I'm not in charge of the cycle parking programme, but I do know that we have been installing more Sheffield stands, which are the very simple sort of bars for cycle parking in high streets, along residential streets, to try and get more people to cycle and to make it safer. As far as the COVID funding budget, that has not been a specific focus for us, but should future funding become available, that is definitely something we will consider. And as for cycling in winter, well, I'm a sort of daily 365 days a year cyclist, and although we do sometimes like comms out to residents for things to be aware of for winter cycling, my take on that is that you just need to be prepared. There's no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothing. And if it's something that you are used to doing and that is your routine and you're well prepared for, then it's just like getting in your car. It's just as easy. And for me, it's easier to get out on my bike, even in the rain, than it would be for me to go downstairs and get the electric car. I live in a.
I like that. I think we've got a new slogan in the making there, Victoria. There's no such thing as bad weather. That needs to be the principle. Just make sure you've packed some waterproofs before you head out on the bike. Now we may have a new link to Lisa, and I'm gonna hurl a question Lisa's way and see whether we get a response back. I'm also hoping that Pim may have been able to text Lisa my number to see whether Lisa can just call directly into my mobile phone and the studio for us to do the same trick that we did earlier with Joe. But if you can hear me okay, Lisa, I wonder whether you want to share with us what businesses should be taking into consideration if they're looking to set up outdoors for the first time, Lisa. And we can see Lisa, but we still can't hear Lisa. It's I'm sure infuriating for viewers just like me that we're so close. But our phone in the studio is live, so if Lisa is able to call in, we will establish a link that way. Slightly Heath Robinson, but hopefully it will work nonetheless. Now, Pim, whilst I wait for Lisa's call, do you have a question from viewers that you'd like to put Victoria's way, perhaps? And I'm not yet hearing you, but I'm hoping that that others can. I don't know whether you could hear Pim there, Victoria. It was silent slip reading from.
Sorry.
Okay, Pim.
Sorry about that.
Go for it.
Deliveries? What about deliveries to business? With the narrowing of roads for active travel, the pressure on roads is greater and deliveries will be delayed or go later in the day.
Yeah, I can provide an answer to that. Any kind of road narrowings are, first of all, done by the sort of highways and transport guidance. So they won't be more narrow than is possible for a delivery vehicle or any kind of large vehicle to go down. So that shouldn't be an issue. Also, the theory and what is demonstrated in practice is when you take away road space from motor vehicles and allocate it to cycles, it does not generally lead to an increase in congestion, because those journeys are then displaced and either don't happen or those journeys are made by active travel means instead. So as I mentioned before, because walking and cycling are more space efficient ways of moving people around, you can move more people via a cycle lane than you can on a road. So as for journey times, there are not many studies don't really demonstrate a delay in sort of delivery times. It might mean like a change of schedule, but in terms of actually delaying or congestion, that's not what is demonstrated as a result of these kinds of measures.
No, I'm sure that'll be reassuring to viewers for whom that's a concern. Now we're going to try one last time to bring Lisa in through a sort of dial out link. So let's try our luck. If we don't have any luck, we will. No, the phone is unfortunately switched off. So we're going to have to pass on hearing from Lisa today, but hopefully we can bring her in to another programme in the weeks ahead. And we can turn to our fourth theme of the morning, which is Eat Out to Help Out. On Monday, of course, this government-funded scheme went live for the month of August. Introduced by government to help eateries and businesses which had to close during the lockdown period. Participating venues, and we're going to hear from two of them shortly, will then claim a reimbursement from the government for the discount that they've passed on to customers. Ealing Council are delighted that more than 100 local businesses, including some of the larger chains, but also independent eateries, pubs, cafes, are participating across the borough's town centres and high streets. And I think we've got on screen, we've got a bit more information on the sort of detail of the scheme, how it works in practice. It's up to a maximum of £10 discount per diner. The scheme, it's worth noting, also it says there's no minimum spend, but you can't claim a discount on alcoholic drinks or service charges, which might be a disappointment to some of our viewers, but there are always limits on these schemes. If you want to find a restaurant locally that's registered for the scheme, there is the shortcut, tinyurl.com/eatout that we would encourage you to follow and find out who's live on the scheme in your neck of the woods. And we have a message from Councillor Jasbir Anand, who was hoping to join us this morning, but unfortunately couldn't at the very last minute, but sent us this message that we all know that restaurants and other types of eateries, many of which operate on wafer-thin margins at the best of times, have been hit hard by the lockdown. Many of us love our local neighbourhood restaurant or cafe, so this is a really good chance to show them your support and save some money. A scheme is also a great opportunity to try somewhere new as well, but try to keep it local to avoid having to travel too far. And we've got a few images from across the borough. Here is, I think, first of all, we're going to have a poster maybe, just to show what you need to look out for in the windows of participating venues. Of course, the borough is a borough with sort of four key town centres. We've got Acton and Ealing Broadway, both very much worthy of your support. We're going to hear from some Ealing Broadway businesses shortly. And then, of course, West Ealing and Southall, where you'll also find businesses participating in the scheme. And, of course, we must never forget Pitshanger, which, of course, was a winner in the British High Street competition not so many years ago, always very active on social media. Now, I'm going to bring in at this point Edwin, who's the sort of founder and managing director of Artisan. I have to say, one of my favourite hangouts in the Ealing town centre. And in fact, I'm drinking this morning some of your curious roux coffee, Edwin. I wonder whether you can tell us a bit about how the scheme has been working for you so far, Edwin.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fantastic scheme that customers are really enjoying. It's taken a few days for customers to sort of get the hang of it. They were all slightly surprised, I think, to get 50% off when they came in on Monday, and they were still slightly surprised on Tuesday. But they're now beginning to get the hang of it and look forward to it. I think what we're finding is people are spending more. They're sort of buying that extra item, which is fantastic, and it is needed, because August is it's brutal for coffee shops, small businesses. This time of year just isn't good for us because a lot of people are away and the offices haven't come back, and you layer that on top of Corona, it's just a very, very tricky time. So this does help. The one thing we have noticed is that customers are a little bit confused, because on one hand, the government is saying, stay at home, we've got local lockdowns, be careful. And then at the other hand, they're sort of saying, but go out, and you've got this incentive for going out, and so on and so forth. So there is a bit of head scratching between our customers. But overall, I think it's been a fantastic initiative, and it's a big discount. I mean, suddenly a coffee is £1.50 or something like that. It does encourage people to come in for a second one during the day, and it really does work. So I think it's been really great. The only thing I would say is it would have been amazing if it was for takeaways as well, because then people could go in the parks and be maybe even safer and they're more comfortable in those areas. But it's definitely a starting point.
And what we heard earlier in the programme, the sort of new requirements that have been introduced by government that has kept businesses so busy trying to get COVID secure over the past few months. How have you put that into practice at Artisan?
I think businesses do need to be fairly nimble at changing the way they operate to make sure they are as safe as they possibly can. And actually, what we've noticed is customers really appreciate that. If you have a good setup that has taken those things into consideration, you can actually become busier because of it. And on the other hand, I think your team really appreciate if you look after them. So things like screens going up all around our counters. Having just packaged food, we obviously freshly prepare it, but we package it nicely, and then changing the flow of the shop so that the queues are very well managed and that they're distanced and the customers feel safe, and also removing tables and things like this. I think all of these things play a massive role in making sure that your customers feel safe through this, and taking as much guidance and support from the council as we can.
And the scheme, of course, really does emphasise, and very understandably, it's a sort of mission for the government at the moment to try and keep as many people employed as possible, sort of beyond the sort of life of the furloughing scheme. What have been, I suppose, the challenges and learnings for you regarding managing your staff, during this testing time?
I think that's a great question. It's probably the hardest challenge that Magda and I are facing is it almost becomes a massive employment exercise. How do we keep as many members of us on as our business gets smaller? Essentially, we aren't taking as much money as we used to. We're down 50%. Yet, as an employer that's worked with some, we've got an amazing team, and we want to try and keep them on as many of them as possible. You have to look at sort of creative solutions through flexible working, through different shift patterns, and trying to look at ways in your business that you can create employment. One thing that we were just talking about yesterday was encouraging all our team to take annual leave throughout the year, which frees up more shifts for people to then step into, rather than paying out their annual leave at the end of the year. Now that actually creates 2 more jobs. So it's trying to think as creatively as you can within your business to really keep these people on as long as we possibly can.
Now that's a really good insight and sort of practical tip, I think, for other businesses trying to sort of navigate that issue. That sometimes we can forget to take our annual leave, and that does mean an opportunity's lost. Now, perhaps a slightly quirky question, but the program team won't forgive me if I don't ask you this. Do you have any tips for making the perfect coffee? I mean, you can see this is of direct interest to me with my generous supply of Curious Roo coffee in the kitchen.
Well, I mean, I would say this, but actually the coffee you use is incredibly important. And it's a bit like wine, you've got to get excited and be curious about the types of coffee you want to taste and get the flavors out. And then I'd say get geeky, get some scales, start sort of exploring the world, go to the Artisan coffee school, online or in person. And it's an amazing and fascinating world out there. That you can just dive straight into and really enjoy.
And is it a trade secret, or can you tell us where your coffee beans come from?
The beans are on your they're from Brazil and Colombia, and that's our blend that gets used in many shops. And then we obviously have single origins that come in and out depending on seasonality.
That's interesting to hear. I've been sort of travelling the world, as you suggested a bit, with my coffee drinking during lockdown, but you'll be glad to know I've ended up coming back to your beans. So the experimenting is over for me. Now I'm going to turn to Miguel, who is, of course, I think one of your neighbours in Ealing, just round the corner. Reineta has been, as I understand it, Miguel, in startup mode, just as the pandemic kicked off. I wonder whether you can tell us a bit about the business and how you've been adapting over the past few months. Miguel. You may be on mute, as I'm not getting any audio. So please just check. Okay. Can we hear you now? Can we hear you? I'm not sure we can. Okay, maybe that Miguel needs to re-establish his link to us. Whilst the techies are fiddling, and I'm sure Pim and Joel are on the case. I'm hoping that I can turn back to Edwin. Are you still with us, Edwin? As I'm keen to get your perspective, perhaps, on some of the issues that we were discussing earlier in the programme, particularly in relation to the sort of pavement licensing, which I'm sure is keeping many business owners up at night. I know you've made use of the pavement space for a long time, but what are you sort of picking up from your conversations with fellow traders on how those changes are working in practice?
Well, I think the first thing to sort of acknowledge is that during Corona, I think the working relationship with the council has become much closer than I've ever seen before in my 9 years of working with councils and small businesses. And they've been really receptive to ideas and actually looking proactively for solutions on our behalf. And I think that's been amazing to see. And I think my biggest bit of advice for other small businesses would be to open that conversation and almost, swallow your pride a little bit and say, yeah, we are struggling. We're a small business and this has really hit us. And what can we do together? What solutions are there maybe on the street that would help us and benefit us? And it goes back to your question earlier, and that in turn creates employment, which in turn creates more people in the area to go and buy lunch and so on and so forth. So it does all feed one into the other. But I think you need to be creative, and you need to look at solutions that can benefit both the council and your own business.
And beyond that, of course, we heard sort of the reflections around this need for risk assessments as part of the sort of COVID secure approach that government is encouraging. You've obviously got a number of outlets beyond sort of Ealing town centre. Was that a sort of a painful process to have to go through, or relatively straightforward given existing knowledge in your business?
Yeah, no, I'd say it's fairly straightforward. I mean, a lot of it is common sense, I would say. And, if you go through it and think about it, good solutions come out of it. And I think they're processes that businesses should do. And to be honest, it's things that I think our customers would expect us to do. They want us to have thought of all the different things. For example, we've recently, in one of our shops, we've changed the light switch to be automatic. So that's one less touch point that our customers have to touch. So now they just walk into the bathroom and they don't need to touch the light switch. It's these little things that I think as a business you can slowly build up over the months to create as safe as business as you possibly can. It might not happen straight away, but over time you can all work towards a very, very corona safe business.
Okay, now we're going to just try turning back to Miguel for a moment, just to see whether the audio's kicked in. But if it hasn't, then we are going to reach out to Lisa to get some input on the regulatory sort of landscape and considerations. Really, kind of picking up on that theme we've just been exploring with Edwin. Now, Miguel, I'm hoping you can hear me, but can I hear you? Is the question.
I can hear you, yes.
Fantastic, and I'm hearing you. So if you just keep the volume up, and we hopefully will be away. But the question I suppose a little earlier was that you were in sort of startup mode when the pandemic kicked off. I wonder whether you can tell us a bit about Reineta as a business and how you've been adapting over the past few months.
Well, for us it was not that difficult because we are mixed concepts. We also do groceries and food. We are like a little food store, and we have any other products and sell. So as soon as it happens, we just open our doors, remove all the sales, stop being a coffee place, and start being a grocery store and delivering around. And since then, we've been adapting to the new situation all the time. I mean, it's been hard, but we didn't have a lot of staff because it was like our family business. So it has been, I wouldn't say easy, but I think when you are small, it's easier to adapt to the changes that happens. So for us, it was my wife, myself, and Stan, the guy who works with us always, and that allowed us to create bubbles. And from then we are working with another marriage that are a friend of us, so we create another bubble, and we continue moving on and adapting. So it has been a good.
So it sounds like a sort of real family affair where everyone has had to roll their sleeves up to keep things moving, and it's been reflected back to me what a warm atmosphere it is for any customers arriving at Reineta for the first time. I think it's fair to say you're the sort of poster child for Eat Out to Help Out at the moment. I think we're going to bring up on screen the Ealing in London website. where you've just been sort of profiled in recent days. A great photo of you and the store up there. Now, one of the things I sort of picked up is that you place a lot of emphasis on local suppliers. I wonder whether you can tell us a bit more, Miguel, about why sort of local suppliers are so important to you.
Well, we have a policy that everyone who wants to bring their products to us, we try and we give them a space for them to place their products. So these people usually are local, and these people usually drive more customers into you because they share this experience with their family, with their customers, with their friends. So I think that one of the things that the pandemic has been to everybody's mind is that you cannot succeed.
I think we might have just lost the audio link there. I think we have. Now I'm good. So I'm gonna have to pause, and we're gonna have to hope that we can bring you back in. But I am gonna take the opportunity now to bring Lisa back into the program. So this is going to be another attempt at a live call out. So let's see how we go. Lisa, welcome back onto the program.
Hi.
Hopefully with a much stronger link now. I'm delighted to say we've been talking a fair bit about sort of pavement issues sort of over the past hour. I suppose it would just be great to get your perspective from a sort of enforcement and sort of inspection sort of point of view on what businesses that are moving out onto the pavement for the first time should be taking into consideration.
Sure. Well, the first thing they should be taking into consideration is how much space is going to be available to them. Victoria talked about trying to put in new bike racks and things like that. I am working with the transport team to make sure that we don't sort of conflict each other. We also need to make sure that there is sufficient space available for pedestrians to get through, particularly those with mobility issues and vision issues. So we are asking that businesses make sure that there's 2 meters of space available between their tables and chairs and the nearest piece of street furniture, like a light pole or a bike rack or a bus stop. The second thing that they should be taking into consideration is staffing issues. If all of the tables and chairs are perfectly lined up, but then customers come and they decide to start gathering together, tables of 6 or 7, and moving the chairs all over the shop, someone needs to be out there sort of enforcing, making sure that those 2 meters of space are still available. Are the tables being bussed properly? Are they being cleaned down? Is there litter all over the shop? Those kinds of issues need to be taken into consideration.
So lots to think about, and as you say, sort of tensions perhaps between the competing demands on limited space outdoors. You mentioned when we were having a bit of a chat before the show went on air earlier around this sort of issue of sort of lateral expansion and the conversations that are now having to happen between some sort of food businesses and their neighbours about accessing more space. How's that working?
Yeah, we are trying to encourage businesses to expand laterally. So if you're a coffee shop and you happen to be next door to a bookshop, have that conversation. See if the bookstore can host maybe a couple of tables and chairs in front of it. That way, you're not moving forward towards the curb, but you are accommodating more customers. In a lot of places, those conversations are happening, and the pizza place is offering the charity shop next door some pizza, and they're hosting a couple of tables and chairs. But what we don't want to do is block off the entrance to the neighboring businesses as well. But I think in a lot of places, if the shop next door is not using the space in front of them, in most cases, they're happy to help out a neighbouring business.
And hopefully then a win for everyone in that it's keeping the high street more active, and you might decide to nip into the bookstore whilst you're having a coffee or after your coffee.
Absolutely. If you're sitting there having a pizza and you're looking through the charity shop and you're thinking, that jumper might actually look good on me, why wouldn't you go in?
Indeed, indeed. Now, there's also been mention, I think, sort of in recent sort of weeks of a sort of new pavement sort of permit scheme sort of coming into play. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Sure. So if you are a business that serves food or drink for consumption on the premises, if you're a restaurant, a pub, a cafe, an ice cream parlor, and you don't normally have tables and chairs outside, with the pavement license, you will qualify to put tables and chairs outside. So the smaller cafes that normally have 5 tops kind of squeezed all together inside can now start looking at some of the pavement area outside to make sure that they can still accommodate the same number or a similar number of customers and still manage social distancing.
So a really helpful sort of practical change then for businesses.
Yeah, the way the bill is worded, it is very specific that it's trying to help businesses cut through all of the bureaucratic red tape and not make it really expensive and so forth. So there will be a one-time only application fee for it. It'll be £100, and then that will last in Ealing until the end of September 2021. So if you're currently a Tables and Chairs customer, rather than making a monthly fee, which is already in most cases over the £100 application fee, you will save potentially thousands by going with the pavement permits.
That sounds really helpful. And in terms of timelines, when should we expect this to sort of go live on the Ealing website, do you think?
Yeah, so the application has to be electronic, and unfortunately we've run into a couple of technical issues trying to get it on our website. We're hoping to get that live on our website by the end of this month. And then once you make the application, a business has to post a notice outside their premises for 5 days for a public consultation. And then the council has 2 weeks to sort of consider the application and either accept it or reject it. And if we don't get to it in those 2 weeks, then it is deemed approved until the end of September 2021.
So very, very speedy in that case. As you promised, it will move through the system fast. Really delighted that we've been able to establish a link in the end and have you on today's programme. Clearly, our persistence has paid off. So we look forward to hopefully having your input again in the near future. But I'm going to now turn back to Miguel to see whether whether the audio has kicked back in, because I was really keen to hear more about Miguel's local supply chain and what suppliers you've been able to bring into your store.
Hi, can you hear me? Yes?
No, we still seem to be jinxed with Okay, so I'm being assured, Miguel, that everyone else can hear you except for me. So you go for it and share your story with viewers, and I'll stop interrupting you.
Okay. Well, sorry about that. I was saying that our suppliers are just the people who surround us, that we always are happy to receive new products from local producers, and it has been proved that it's a really nice way to create a lovely community of people who buys and supplies you. And as soon as we have the lockdown, we start calling all the people who were supplying us, and they were starting calling us too to find if they can place the products, because they've been they see how the usual buyers they were reduced. So we stock a lot of the products, and we make a different kind of promotions for the people to buy, and it worked really well. And well, I think that in these situations you need to always rely on your suppliers and your friends, and try to work all together in order to go through it. And it's the same people who supplies me, is the people who are driving customers into our place. So it's a lovely symbiosis between us. So it worked really well. I think that's mainly.
Okay, I think it's back to me. That's what the tech team are advising. Now, I'm hoping, Pim, I can bring you back in for one last question, perhaps, from viewers, maybe for Victoria or Edwin.
So for Edwin, what tips do you have for other restaurants and businesses who may be hesitant to join the Eat Out to Help Out scheme?
Well, I just think they should probably do it. I think it's been set up and established to help small businesses and businesses during this time. And I think what people will generally start to find is that customers start to go to the businesses that offer this discount. I mean, I went to a lovely local restaurant in Ealing just last night because they were offering this. And I think people that are looking for this discount, so if you don't do it, I think people might stop coming to your establishment. It is very simple to run, but you do need to be in touch with the provider of your EPOS to set it all up, and that can take a little bit of time and negotiations. But most of those companies have now got an update that they just run in the background, and it will start working, and all the flaws have sort of been ironed out. So yeah, I'd encourage people to get involved.
So a simple message there from Edwin of just do it, get involved, sign up to Eat Out to Help Out if you haven't already. Now our hour is almost up, but the sort of final sort of theme and I suppose update really that we wanted to share with you from the economic development team at the council is how they're navigating the crisis by working in close partnership with the local business community, something that Edwin sort of reflected on in his remarks earlier. The council has established a stakeholder group comprising of BIDs, business improvement districts, high street representatives and local businesses, and internal licensing, regulatory, economic growth, marketing and comms, enforcement and inspections teams are all involved in the process. The group's been growing to ensure the right mix of individuals and businesses to support businesses are around the table. And the collaborative approach is really driven by a recognition that more can be achieved by targeting support where it's most required, and pooling the creativity and resources of all stakeholders together, identifying new solutions along the way, as well as planning for sustainability and renewal, and being inclusive of diverse voices and needs, all of which can make sure that our high streets and town centres are sustained and renewed. And a final reminder, really, for any viewers seeking out more detail that was referenced by the officers earlier in today's programme, please go to ealing.gov.uk/coronavirus business. And if you're a business wishing to participate in Eat Out to Help Out, then visit the gov.uk website. And it's a horribly long website address that we've got on screen there, but I'm sure if you just put gov.uk and register your establishment for Eat Out to Help Out into Google, the link will come up easily enough. Now, we are at the end of our hour, unfortunately, which is never long enough. I hope it has been as interesting for you as it has been for me. It's certainly kept us on our toes with the various tech gremlins that have gotten our way, but I think we've just about overcome. There is a survey that I think Pim will be sharing with you in the live chat window that we'd encourage you to click through to give us your feedback on the programme and let us know what you'd like covered in future. Thank you, as always, from me to our production team, Joel at Revolution Audio, Pim, Barney and Adam at West London Business, as well as Carol and Robin at Ealing Council. A particular thank you to my guests this morning, Joe Blanchard, Lisa Buckmaster, and Victoria Willis from Ealing Council, as well as Edwin Harrison, Managing Director of Artisan and Curious Root Coffee, and Miguel Morales, founder of Reineta. If you haven't yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, please click on the button below the video stream to stay informed and show your support. And of course, diarise Thursday the 20th of August at 9 AM for our second special webcast with Ealing Council, where we will be taking a look at digital transformations of businesses in Ealing. Until then, as always, we wish you, your friends, family and colleagues good health, and please maintain social distancing wherever possible to stay safe.